But why do you like that skin?
Eblana is the first 6-star Shaper caster, and be it because of her strength, the aura she's been farming ever since chapter 9, your taste being immaculate, or her simply catering to many audiences, a lot of people have been waiting for her release, and Hypergriff certainly delivered when designing Banana's kit. So let's see what they cooked, discuss how well she performs overall, and see if she's best for you. Starting like always with S1. This is a very simple skill, but a very effective one nonetheless, as one has both a passive and active effect. The passive makes so every time she summons or upgrades a servant, they deal 450% of her attack as arts damage to all enemies around them.
What? Servants? Upgrade? What even are those?
Well, this is how we get to her talent 1. Shaper casters all share a similar talent that makes so when enemies die in their range, a summon will appear on that spot. For Tekno, they take the form of these little ghosts, while Eblana summons the servants you're all familiar with from her event, but the difference isn't just on their appearance, both summons work very differently. Tekno is quantity over quality, both her and her summons deal basically no damage, but she can fill her entire range and more with them, while Banana has a 3 servant cap, but both her and the summons can do a lot more damage. Not only that, but like as one mentioned, she can also upgrade her servants. That happens whenever you hit the 3 summon cap. After that, further clues will increase their stats and block count, as well as fully heal them. You can only upgrade each servant once, but the stat increase is big enough that you will see the difference, so Eblana is a quality over quantity. And as one really wants you abusing her summons, Tekno kinda just wants to fill the field as much as possible, and that's it. Which is also something Banana wants to do, but as one incentivizes you to treat the summons as resources, which is extremely fitting for Eblana and makes her gameplay very unique. The passive rewards you for cycling through the servants, so it's interesting that you never let them be for too long and even undeploy them if you need to, so you can get fresh ones. The game even lets you know which are upgraded by their sprites, with the base version having a normal sword, while the upgraded ones have a glowing one. Though it can still be pretty hard to see, especially if you have too much shit clogging your screen. Something that they made better on her skin, since with it you can see the entire sprite burning when on stage 2, while on stage 1 you'll see only a normal version of it. Which gives you one more reason to buy one of the best skins in the game. You're welcome. This does create one big weakness though, and that's the fact you kinda need big waves of mobs to keep the ball rolling, since by herself Eblana really isn't that impressive of a caster, and the servants even with decent stats are pretty fragile against elites, which is why they also gave us one an active part. Whenever you activate it, Eblana will refresh all servants on field, or summon a new one if there are none deployed, and they even keep all upgrades when you do that. This synergizes perfectly with the passive and covers for a lot of the weaknesses in S1. You're still gonna have a very slow start depending on the map, and there will still be awkward moments when against elites, but once you get past that initial struggle, Banana can just keep going. The refresh lets you manage the servants so they don't just die easily, since he brings them back at full HP. It also lets you simply use them as fodder to trigger a chain explosion if you want to do a lot of damage in one specific area. Which not only makes this skill fit her character even more, but it also lets you not be 100% reliant on enemy waves for damage, so a lot of times you can simply keep cycling it until you win, since the explosions do deal a lot of damage, and it has a ridiculously low SP cost of 13, giving you the best of both worlds, where if the stage has a lot of big enemy waves all cramped together, Eblana Eblana can simply keep cycling from her servants and blowing everything up, but if the mobs are more scattered around and tougher to kill, she can simply fall back on the refresh to deal with them. You can even just abuse her short skill cycle to stall certain enemies, though that's more of a niche case, since most elites and bosses can usually one or two shot her servants, so it only works on the ones with low DPS, and that's actually related to S1's biggest weakness, elites. If you remember, I said that the active part lets her keep the ball rolling, which is true, but she still struggles to get it started in a lot of cases when you place her on lanes with only elite enemies. Seems like I said, her own damage is pretty garbage, and that will usually be the most awkward part of her gameplay for you, getting the first servants on field, especially if you want to time them to be on a specific tile. Thankfully, Eblana is pretty smooth to run after that, and it's only initial hurdle. She can even thrive in those elite only lanes I mentioned as long as you give her the bare minimum amount of assistance. So just use your head a little bit and you get an excellent skill that's perfect against big enemy waves, can trigger chain explosions from just one kill, instantly getting 3 upgraded summons, and works perfectly as a lane holding option, especially because her heals aren't capped like the upgrade. So you can even just use them as normal meat shields instead of cannon fodder if you want to. The only real struggle is against very strong elites, and even then all you need is another op to deal with them, which is a very common bananas one setup. Let her solo 99% of the stage while that 1% of problematic mobs are dealt with by one other op. Kinda like another character that also uses summons, and this skill is so good it actually competes with her other tools, since all it needs is a semi-consistent supply of mobs to refill the servants, which is not exactly rare in Arknights, being even the gimmick of some events. So if you want a very fun and powerful skill that's also very well designed both lore and gameplay wise, you really can't go wrong here.
見えた。指先で触れるだけでその意志は泥人形のようにひしゃげるだろう。
Oh my god.
What?
Oh, I can't believe I can do this.
What?
This. No.
What are you doing?
Where is it? Wait.
Are you gonna play it herself?
In-game promotion.
It doesn't really work. It's because you can see her quote. Oh, there you go. Look at that. Can you make it not move though? Let's keep it there. Let's keep it right there.
And this brings us to S2.
これがお前の判断。我がこの死者の喧騒にある終わりの名を暴曲という。
This one is the most unique skill in her entire kit, not because it does anything that crazy compared to the other two, but rather because of how it interacts with her summons. And what do I mean by that? Well, I think I made it abundantly clear on the S1 section how important her servants are, since this skill quite literally needs them for the explosions. And when we get to S3, you'll see that it's the same thing there. S2 though focuses a lot more on bananas damage than the servants. It's therefore cases where you can't rely on the summons too much, either because the map doesn't have enough ground tiles or on lanes where only stronger mobs go through. That way she doesn't have to deal with S1's low damage when you don't have enough mobs to feed her. It does that by placing up to 2 targets in her into sleep and dealing 160% of her attack as arch damage every 0.5 seconds. All that while doing her aura farming pose, so she basically starts emoting while blasting up to 2 guys in range. That's the TLDR. It even summons 2 additional servants for every target killed, so you can get 3 per mob now. And if you've been looking at the red numbers, you might have noticed they get bigger as the skill goes. That's because of her talent too. It increases her attack to 140% when attacking enemies below 50% HP. Which is why you can see S2 getting stronger once enemies get that low. But how strong is S2 really? Not that good. Okay. The skill itself is fine, you can kill a lot of stuff with it and you get some summons from that. The problem comes when you compare it to her other 2 skills. When you take them into account, S2 is just bad, relatively speaking. And the issue isn't focusing so much on only her own damage, because let me tell you, even with all those attack multipliers, Eblana still doesn't do enough damage to justify using S2. She can kill some tough enemies with it, but it doesn't give her the tools to scale well with enemy defensive stats, like res ignore for instance, so Eblana struggles a lot to deal with higher res enemies. And I'm not even talking about someone like Patriot who has 90 res. These shield guards are already too much for her with their 60 res. It also becomes a problem when they have high HP, even with relative low res like the Twilight of Olomon golems. And maybe you're thinking, okay, a caster can't kill a 60 res enemy or a 100k HP golem, how does that make this skill bad? And you're correct, which is why I'm trying to make one thing clear here. S2 is a good skill and it can certainly be useful, but when you compare it to her other skills, they really just stomp S2 in 99% of cases for general gameplay. Sure, she can deal with some elites well, but so can S1, and you don't need to sacrifice her we covered on it like with S2. Sure, she can deal better with elite-only lanes where S1 struggles, but like I said, S1 only struggles at getting started on those. Once you get 3 servants running, you can do very well on its own, and if you really want the better elite lane holder, S3 is right there. They even made S2 cost 20 SP, which might not sound bad. And it isn't, it's actually a really good cost, but it's more expensive than both other skills, which kinda exemplifies the entire point I'm trying to make. Is there any case where S2 is better then? Well, yeah, this is Arknights, there's always a niche for everything. And like I said, S2 is not dependent on the servants to work, while S1 and S3 need them to function, so if a map doesn't allow her to deploy them, that's where S2 shines. The crowd control is also really nice to catch fast enemies running through. You can think of it as something like Whistle S2, in 99% of content S3 is the better option, but in places like a S5 where you want the multi-hit AoE, S2 thrives. So yes, S2 does have its uses, but her other skills are generally better 99% of the time, and S2 will only really shine on niche scenarios like high risk CC. So if you plan to really use Banana everywhere, that's pretty much the best use it has, but if you're not that much of a sweaty player, then it's fine to skip this one.
命は枯れて消え、残滓のみが徘徊する。
Can I get more copies?
Why do you need more copies?
Because she's not max spot.
Hey. Hey. Just pull the bag. Yeah. You know what? She'll be the next one for sure.
Bot 5 right here. Oh yeah, I'm hearing it. Yeah, this is the
Perfect.
6-star bag. See? Eblana right now.
And so we get to S3.
我が炎に指先で触れるだけでその意志は泥人形のようにひしゃげるだろう。
This S3 is fucking absurd. It's basically the busted skill with broken multipliers that a lot of 6-stars have. And in Banana's case it works both offensively and defensively. Just like S1, this skill has a passive, which lets her summon one special servant, that's this chunky guy here or a sea monster if you have her skin. Eblana will prioritize summoning them if there aren't any on the field, so you'll always get it on the first kill. And if they happen to leave the field for any reason, she'll always summon it first on her next kill, so no need to worry about him dying permanently, which can always be very useful if you want to reposition it, only requiring you want to deploy it and kill a mob where you want him to be. So what makes this summon special? Well, first of all, his stats are a lot higher than normal servants. Just his base stats are already massive, with 5.5k HP, 924 attack and 510 defense, so except for the defense and res, he has triple the stats of a normal servant. But this is only his base form. If you read S3, you'll see Banana can upgrade him 6 times, with each upgrade massively increasing his numbers. He even gets +1 block and range on the 3rd and 6th ones. All of this results in him having 14.4k HP when fully upgraded, on top of 1.1k defense and 2.4k attack. This fucking summon is tankier than all pianas on his S3. So in the end, you'll get this impenetrable wall that never dies and can tank basically anything. Do you think that's all? Well, think again, cause we're still not done. It wasn't enough to make this guy with bloated stats, Hypergriff also decided to give him his own skill. He uses it automatically every 15 seconds, dealing 120% of his attack as arts damage to every enemy in front of him.
How does he even determine what's his front?
Well, basically it's the direction Eblana is looking at. If she's facing right, then this guy also faces right, and so on. Which is actually the case for all her servants, not just the big one, but that's only relevant for him since he's the only one who can use that skill, while their normal attacks have a cross-shaped range. Back to the skill though, you get a true AoE arts attack with 4 tiles range that does massive damage and only costs 15 SP. Sure, like I said on the S2 section, Banana doesn't have res ignore, so that damage won't scale that well against high res, but honestly all the other things surrounding it do make up for that. Like the 4 tiles range of the summon, or the fact it's true AoE damage, or just the 15 SP cost, which lets him spam this skill. And let me remind you, this is a summon. A summon with already bloated stats that are enough to tank most of the stuff you'll see in general gameplay. Him having that skill that can do good damage and has all those quality of life features just make him even more busted. Let's also not forget this is only S3 passive, so there's still the active part to talk about.
我が炎の指先で触れるだけでその意志は泥人形のようにひしゃげる
It makes Eblana deal 3 hits that also have true AoE in front of her. That's only the first effect, but it's already pretty busted when you consider it deals 800% of her attack as arts damage. So if you thought the summon's damage was too low, they got you covered here. But that's not all. It's also with the active portion that Eblana upgrades the big servant. She does that by consuming the small guys and feeding them to him, taking into account if they are upgraded or not, of course. So it always takes 6 kills to fully max him. And just for good measure, she also heals 20% of his max HP per servant, with no cap on the amount of times you can consume them, so you can perpetually heal him even after hitting the upgrade cap. And we're still not done here. Her module adds another final damage multiplier if she attacks an enemy blocked by her summons, and at level 3 increases her attack by 25% for 10 seconds after killing an enemy, with a nice 55 base attack buff on top of that. On screen right now we can see how much of a buff that is on S3. It increased the damage of each hit by around 800 here, and the difference grows even bigger when the boss is below 50% HP, now being a 1.1k increase. Now maybe you're thinking it doesn't sound that crazy with the 25% attack buff only less than 10 seconds, and you're right. The difference is quite big, but it only lasting for a short while, and requiring you have a mob to kill to get it kinda balance it out. But here's my counterpoint. She doesn't have the attack buff on this clip. This is just her base attack. All that difference is just from the 55 base attack increase and the trait upgrade buff from the module. So the difference can grow even larger when you include that. Upwards of 2.7k per hit in this case. That's what you get when you give an 800% multiplier to an operator. And sure, she still has the high res problem, but for S3 specifically it's actually fine, because for as much as I glazed how much fucking damage she does, this is still not a DPS skill. It's more akin to something like Link's S3. Not because they play the same, their gameplay is completely different from each other, but both skills have the same idea of being overloaded with stats. Banana has a 14.4 HP monster and a shit ton of DPS, but it's all contained within her range. While Link has much weaker summons and DPS, but she has much more freedom to deploy them wherever she wants. They both have a shit ton of firepower to make up for an entire team, which is why they can solo entire stages, and this is where Eblana's strength lies. Once you place her on a lane, assuming it's not a stage where all enemies have absurd res, she's gonna hold that shit down until the end. With that massive wall that's her servant, her great AoE damage from S3, the insane amount of healing she can provide the summon, and his own AoE skill he can spam every 15 seconds to complement Banana's own 16 SP on S3. But here's the question, should you pull her? Well, for as much as I glazed Eblana, this is actually not easy to answer. In fact, I think that for most people she's not really a good pull, because she's basically Link. See, Link is the strongest top in the game. Did that sentence sound right to you? For most, I assure it didn't, even though she quite literally is the character with the most amount of records in the game. So you could make an argument for her being the strongest. The problem with that though is that you would be using a metric that most people don't give a fuck about, which is being able to clear a stage with the least amount of ops. But for the majority of the player base, this is what their squad looks like, a combination of a bunch of the best 6 stars they got, Myrtle, and maybe 1 or 2 characters they like. If you try to fit Ling on a team like this, she is probably never getting used, because her statistic dragons can't compete with an op with skills. So her biggest strength of being able to make up for an entire team is diluted. Eblana is in a similar situation, where she herself is a powerhouse of a character, with an impenetrable wall, good damage and support for said wall, as well as an insane S1 that wrecks any wave heavy map. But just like with Ling, you lose a lot of that one-man army value she has when adding more ops. The summon is still there and her damage is just as high as before, but you're not really making full use of her kit, just like a Ling on a normal team. She does suffer a lot less from that than Ling, since the restriction of working only inside her range comes with more firepower and quality of life features like the summons not taking deployed slots, which does help her integrate better with a full team, but then she stops being the powerhouse I was talking about that can solo entire stages with massive DPS and that insane summon, and pretty much becomes a very good tank, which sure is still good, but not that crazy, especially when you consider all the stacked characters we'll get after her. So this is where you have to ask yourself, does her gameplay look appealing to you? Because if it does and you do like her unique low-up playstyle, then I can confidently say Banana is a great pull, and she's one of the best ops you can have, but if you're more of a general player who just wants to clear and be done, then she can still be good, but I wouldn't recommend Eblana with all the broken shit coming after her, and if you're interested in something else, then you were already gonna pull her anyway. I'm just here to show her kit, shove her feet on your face, and get paid for it, so it's up to you to decide. If you wanna see the future ops ranked and explained in detail though, then I made this video ranking all of them, so you can go check it out. Just leave a like and subscribe before you go, and comment what you think of Banana too. And if you want to support me, use emotes on my channel, get a username badge, or simply appear on Eblana's special place, you can also consider becoming a member. That's it then. Bye.
己を抑える必要はどこにある？お前に鬼滅の欲望があるように見える。何も我慢することなく、すべてさらけ出せばよいだろう。